My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 32 years old, and I'm watching my entire life implode from the corner of a high-end chop house. At his own retirement party, my father just announced that my brother Richard will be inheriting the whole company. Then, looking directly at me, he added, "And my daughter? Well, if she plays her cards right, maybe she can land a manager position at a fast food joint." The air in the room grew thick and tense. My brother, Rich, just smirked and chimed in. She'd find a way to mess that up, too. Just as the sting of tears began to burn my eyes, our family's longtime attorney, Samuel Croft, stood up from his table, a stern look on his face, and began walking toward the microphone. "Where are you watching this from? Let me know your city or country in the comments, make sure you're subscribed, and stay with me to find out what happened when the lawyer finally cleared his throat." Being Arthur Vance's daughter meant growing up in a world of expectations I could never quite meet. Our family was the name behind Vance Industrial, a manufacturing firm my grandfather had built from nothing, which now provided jobs for nearly 400 people across the Midwest. My earliest memories are of family dinners that felt more like board meetings, with conversations dominated by supply chain logistics, profit margins, and hostile takeover rumors. While other kids got bedtime stories, I got lectures on economic forecasts. My brother Rich, 5 years my senior, was anointed the heir apparent from the moment he was born. Dad would beam with pride, tousling his hair whenever Rich showed even a flicker of interest in the business. "That's my boy, the future of this company," he'd declare to anyone who would listen, while I sat there, a ghost at the table, my perfect report cards and genuine fascination with my grandfather's legacy going completely unnoticed. My mother, Margaret, did her best to be a buffer in her own quiet way, but she had long since settled into her role as the dutiful, non-confrontational corporate wife. "Your father just wants what's best for Vance Industrial," she'd murmur, finding me in my room after Dad had made another casually cutting remark. "He loves you, Ellie. It's just his way." But his way never felt much like love. When I was 13, I poured weeks of effort into creating a detailed proposal on how our company could pivot to sustainable, eco-friendly materials. I did the research, I made charts, I practiced my pitch in the mirror. My father gave it a cursory glance that lasted maybe 20 seconds before patting my head and saying, "That's a nice little school project, honey. Now why don't you let the adults talk business?" He then turned his full attention to some half-baked idea Rich had about a new company softball team. Despite the endless stream of rejection, a stubborn fire inside me refused to be extinguished. Maybe it was pure grit. Maybe it was a desperate need to finally win his approval. Or maybe it was just a true, unyielding passion for the business my grandfather had poured his soul into. For whatever reason, I pushed myself relentlessly through high school, acing every business course, and eventually graduated with honors from Wharton with my MBA. Rich, on the other hand, coasted through a 5-year victory lap at a local college, barely earning a business degree before Dad handed him a vice president title at Vance Industrial. He was notorious for showing up late, pawning off his responsibilities, and blowing a small fortune of company money on extravagant client dinners that almost never materialized into actual business. After I finished graduate school, I had to practically beg for a job at my own family's company. Dad finally and reluctantly stuck me in the marketing department, a place he considered far from the real action and any meaningful decisions. "Let's see if you can manage to handle this," he'd said, his tone implying my Ivy League degree was worthless. Within 6 months, I had tripled our online engagement and single-handedly landed a contract with a national retail giant, a deal that brought in over $3 million in new revenue. The internal company newsletter celebrated the achievement but conveniently omitted my name from the article. When I brought this to my father's attention, he just shrugged. "It was a team success, Eleanor. There's no need to be a glory hog." That very same month, Rich lost a client worth nearly $1 million because he forgot a critical deadline. He faced zero repercussions. When I dared to point out this blatant double standard, my father's temper flared. This company has fed this family for 3 generations, and you have the audacity to critique how I run it? You think a few cute social media posts are the same as the high-stakes decisions your brother has to make? My mother pulled me aside later. Ellie, you know your father. Just keep your head down and do your job. It'll get better. But it didn't. It never did. For years, I had a front row seat to watch Rich fail his way to the top, while every single one of my achievements was downplayed, ignored, or credited to someone else. Last year, I developed and executed a complete rebranding initiative that dragged our company's image into the 21st century and successfully captured a younger demographic. The board was thrilled. A couple of them even took me aside privately to praise my vision. During my presentation, my father sat there, stone-faced. Later, I heard him telling a business partner, loud enough for me to overhear. We brought in some outside consultants. They had a few decent ideas for a new marketing angle. Always good to get an outside perspective. Those consultants never existed. The work was mine, and mine alone. Meanwhile, Rich's judgment calls grew more and more reckless. He filled key positions with his unqualified buddies, championed an outrageously expensive new software system that was so user-unfriendly it was abandoned within months, and treated our most dedicated long-term employees with open contempt. The business trips became more frequent and more luxurious, looking far more like personal vacations than work. About 3 months ago, I walked past the office of our financial controller, Brenda, and overheard her in a hushed, tense conversation with our lawyer, Samuel Croft, about discrepancies in the expense logs. They clammed up the second they saw me, but Brenda later pulled me aside and hinted that not everything was as it seemed with the company's books. When I pushed her for more information, she just gave a sad shake of her head and said, "Your father manages things his own way." Despite it all, some foolish part of me held on to hope that his retirement would be the moment of truth. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would finally acknowledge my relentless hard work and my unwavering dedication. Maybe he'd finally see my talent and include me in the future of the company, alongside my brother. As the night of his retirement party drew closer, I bought a new dress. I wrote out some thoughtful words in case I was asked to say something, and I even polished a new set of innovative proposals for the company's future. I should have known better, but I still allowed myself to hope, and it was that hope that made the gut punch at the party so utterly devastating. The event was at Morton's Steakhouse, held in a private dining hall with dark mahogany walls and dim lighting that screamed old money and legacy. Close to 100 people were there. Family, veteran employees, business partners, and old friends who had seen the Vance empire flourish. The clinking of crystal glasses filled the air as servers weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and the savory scent of aged prime rib hung heavy in the room. I'd shown up half an hour early to help with the final touches, making sure the centerpieces of white lilies and silver dollar eucalyptus were perfectly arranged. My stomach was a knot of pure anxiety, but I plastered on a polite, professional smile. "Eleanor." Brenda, our controller, who'd been with the company for over 2 decades, gave me a warm, genuine hug. "That dress is absolutely stunning on you." "Thanks, Brenda," I said, smoothing the front of the deep sapphire dress I'd splurged on. "Everything seems to be going perfectly, right?" Brenda's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, everything is as planned." She gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "You know, everyone on the marketing team thinks the world of you. Your leadership has meant so much." Before I could dig deeper, my Uncle Robert intercepted me. "There's my favorite niece." All set for the main event? His cheer felt a little hollow, and he quickly pivoted to talking about the unseasonably warm weather. As the room buzzed with conversation, I saw Samuel Croft, our family's lawyer, standing near the bar, clutching a leather portfolio and checking his watch. He made brief eye contact with me, gave a stiff nod, and then stepped outside to answer his phone. Mr. Croft had always been a distant, though impeccably professional figure, a sharp, calculating man in his late 50s who had managed our family's legal affairs for nearly 2 decades. My father finally made his grand entrance, working the room like a seasoned politician, shaking hands and accepting praise with a well-practiced smile. At 66, Arthur Vance was still an imposing figure, tall and confident. His perfectly coiffed silver hair and custom-tailored suit radiated success. 40 years, I heard him boom to a circle of admirers. 40 years building this place into what it is, but the next generation is going to take it to even greater heights. His eyes scanned the room, sliding right past me as if I were part of the wallpaper, and landed squarely on Rich, who was holding court with his own group of sycophants. My brother, in his flashy, overpriced suit, looked every bit the part of the heir apparent, laughing a little too loudly at his own jokes. At 37, Rich had our father's height, but lacked his disciplined build, his frame softened by years of lavish dinners on the company dime. "We're rolling out a full modernization strategy," Rich announced to his audience. "New territories, aggressive acquisitions." The old man was playing it a little too safe for the last few years. I had to bite my lip to keep from shouting that he had personally vetoed every single innovative idea I had brought to the table. Diane from payroll approached me, her expression full of sympathy. "Eleanor, I just had to tell you, that new vendor payment system you pushed through last quarter, it's saving my department at least 20 hours of work a week." I felt a small flicker of warmth. I'm so glad it's helping. I've actually got some ideas for overhauling the inventory management system if anyone's interested. "Oh, there's definitely interest," Diane said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But you might want to, wait until things settle down after tonight." Her vague warning just added to my growing sense of dread. Just then, my mother appeared, a vision of elegance in a pearl necklace and a tasteful Chanel suit. "Eleanor, darling," she said, air-kissing my cheek, "you look beautiful. Have you had a chance to speak with your father?" "He looks a little preoccupied," I answered, watching him roar with laughter alongside a few board members. My mother's smile became rigid. "Well, it is his night. Just try to remember that your father always does what he believes is best for the family." It felt less like a comfort and more like a final warning. Across the room, I saw Mr. Croft had returned and was now in a low, intense conversation with Brenda. They both looked grim, and they kept glancing over at my father and brother. A server announced that dinner was about to be served. As guests found their tables, I saw that I was at the main family table, but seated at the far end, buffered by my mother and a third cousin I barely knew. Rich, naturally, was seated at our father's right hand. Right before we sat, I overheard 2 board members talking, and their words sent a chill down my spine. "A complete restructuring. From what Arthur tells me," one said, "he's got it all mapped out. A clean slate for the new leadership." "And the daughter?" the other asked. "She'll be reassigned. Probably for the best, all things considered." They saw me looking and immediately started talking about golf. My worst fears were being confirmed. Whatever was about to happen, I was the one on the chopping block. As the salad course arrived, the knot in my stomach was so tight I couldn't manage a single bite. Rich held court at the table, talking about his grand plans, while Dad nodded along, beaming with pride. They never once looked at me or asked for my opinion. My eyes scanned the room, searching for an ally. I found Brenda, who was watching me with a look of deep concern. Next to her, Mr. Croft was staring intently at his tablet, his face a mask of neutrality. Something was definitely brewing beneath the polished surface of this event. When the main courses were served, Dad tapped his wine glass with a knife, calling for silence. Before we dig into these incredible steaks, I just want to thank all of you for being here. The formal speeches are for dessert, but I have to say how proud I am to see so many of you who have been part of the Vance Industrial family for years, for decades. The room filled with applause. I clapped on autopilot, my mind screaming, "You're not part of it. You don't matter to him." As we ate, I was acutely aware of the hushed, important conversation happening just a few seats away. My father was leaning in close to Rich, whispering something that made them both glance in my direction before quickly looking away. A bomb was about to be dropped, and I was standing right at ground zero. After the dessert plates were cleared and coffee was poured, my father stood and walked to the small lectern set up at the front. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to Arthur Vance, the man of the hour. "Friends, family, colleagues," he began, his voice commanding. "Tonight is about closing one chapter and opening another. 40 years ago, I came to work for my father, and together we forged Vance Industrial into the powerhouse it is today. Dad spoke about my grandfather's vision and the challenges they'd faced. He was a master storyteller, charming and captivating. He thanked veteran employees by name, sharing little anecdotes that highlighted their loyalty. "Brenda, 30 years of keeping our books in perfect order," he said, raising a glass to our controller. "And Samuel Croft, 2 decades of brilliant legal advice that saved our bacon more times than I can count." The lawyer simply inclined his head, his expression unreadable, as he continued to study his tablet. Dad went on, talking about the future, about technology, about staying competitive. My heart started to pound in my chest. Despite all the signs, a stupid little flame of hope refused to die. Maybe this was it. Maybe he'd finally acknowledge my work. "But no man can lead forever," he said, his voice turning serious. "It's time for me to step away and do a little more fishing while I've still got the arm strength to reel in a big one." The crowd chuckled politely. My pulse quickened. The question of succession is the single most important decision a leader makes. Dad continued. "You need someone with the right DNA, the right instincts, someone who can carry the torch into the future." He paused, a look of immense satisfaction on his face. "And I am blessed to have a son who is the living embodiment of all those qualities. Richard has been by my side for 15 years, learning the ropes. He has my absolute, unconditional trust and the full backing of our board." He motioned for Rich to come up and join him. My brother stood, a smug grin spreading across his face as he adjusted his tie and swaggered to the podium. The two of them stood there, a united front of legacy and power. Effective this coming Monday, Richard Vance will take over as Chief Executive Officer of Vance Industrial, with full and total authority to guide this company into its next great era. Applause erupted. I clapped, my face a frozen mask of polite support that took every ounce of my energy to maintain. I'd known this was coming, but the public ceremony was a special kind of pain. But he wasn't done. He held up a hand to quiet the room, and his next words were the ones that would shatter me completely. "Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What about my daughter, Eleanor?" Every head in the room swiveled to face me. I could feel the blood rushing to my cheeks. Ellie has been with us in the marketing department for a while now, and, well, she's tried. But I think it's fair to say the Vance business gene skipped a generation in her case. A few nervous, uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the audience. I sat paralyzed, my mind refusing to process what was happening. "So, what becomes of Eleanor?" he went on, talking about me as if I were a line item in a budget. "Well, Rich will be making some personnel changes, streamlining some of the less effective departments." His eyes locked onto mine, cold and utterly dismissive. "My son gets the business. My daughter? She might get a job at Wendy's, if she's lucky. The corporate world isn't for everyone." The room fell deathly silent. The air was sucked out of my lungs. My mother's hand found mine under the table, but she kept her gaze fixed on her plate, unwilling to defy him. Then Rich leaned into the microphone, his sneer twisting his face as he delivered the final killing blow. She'd screw that up, too. This time, the laughter was weaker, more scattered. People started looking at their plates, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. I sat there, numb. 30 years of my life flashed before my eyes. Every dismissed idea, every ignored success, every desperate attempt to earn the love of a man who was incapable of giving it. The room started to spin. The taste of bile rose in my throat. I gripped my water glass, my knuckles white, certain it would shatter. But I would not cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. My father launched into his retirement plans, golfing in Florida, consulting on the side. Rich stood next to him, smirking in my direction. Across the room, Brenda looked horrified, her hand over her mouth. A few of the employees I'd worked closely with exchanged worried looks. But no one said a word. No one dared to challenge the king. I thought about just getting up and walking out, but some primal instinct kept me pinned to my chair, and that's when it happened. Samuel Croft closed his portfolio with a sharp, definitive click. He rose from his seat and walked with purpose toward the podium, his face an unreadable mask of calm professionalism. Mr. Croft was known for two things: his meticulous attention to detail and his unwavering discretion, traits my father had often praised. Now he cleared his throat, a sound loud enough to cut my father off mid-sentence. "Arthur," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm afraid there are a few matters that require clarification before you proceed." My father looked visibly irritated. "Sam, can't this wait? We're celebrating tonight." "I'm afraid it cannot," Mr. Croft replied, gently but firmly taking the microphone. "As legal counsel for Vance Industrial, it is my fiduciary responsibility to ensure that all relevant parties are fully and accurately informed." The room was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, thick with anticipation. Rich shot a nervous look at my father. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Croft began, adjusting his spectacles, "while we are all here to honor Arthur Vance's long and successful career, there are certain legal stipulations regarding company succession that must be addressed." My father tried to interrupt. "Samuel, this is neither the time nor the place." "On the contrary," Mr. Croft said smoothly, his hand firmly on the podium, "this is precisely the time and place, as you've just made public declarations about the company's future leadership that are not, in fact, legally sound." A collective gasp went through the room. I sat up a little straighter. Whatever was happening, this was not on the agenda. "As some of you may recall," Mr. Croft continued, "Vance Industrial was co-founded by Arthur's father, Harold Vance, and his partner, a man named Walter Sterling. Uncle Wally. He had been my godfather, a kind, gentle man with no children of his own who had always taken a special interest in me. He passed away about 5 years ago. When Mr. Sterling sold his shares to the Vance family, he did so with several binding conditions," Mr. Croft explained. "One of those conditions, which is legally enshrined in the company charter, dictates that all leadership transitions must be based on proven merit and documented contribution, not simply on blood relation." He pulled a document from his portfolio. Walter Sterling was also Eleanor Vance's godfather, a role he took very seriously. Before he died, he tasked me with ensuring that when this day came, his goddaughter would be given a fair and impartial evaluation based on her actual performance. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. "This is absurd. I'm the majority shareholder. I make the decisions." "Actually, Arthur," Mr. Croft cut in, his voice still level, "your status as majority shareholder is conditional upon your adherence to the company charter, a charter you signed and ratified when you became CEO. Section 14. B clearly states that succession must consider all qualified family members with an evaluation by the board based on documented merit." He then turned to the crowd. "For the past 3 years, as per Mr. Sterling's directive, I have been quietly compiling performance records for both Richard and Eleanor Vance." He held up another folder. These records demonstrate that Eleanor Vance has been directly responsible for securing 4 major new accounts, launching a rebrand that increased our market share by 18%, and implementing cost-saving initiatives that have improved her department's profitability by 25%. The silence in the room was absolute. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. Someone had been watching. Someone had been keeping score. By contrast, Mr. Croft continued, his voice relentless. I have also documented a pattern of mismanagement under Richard Vance's leadership, including the disastrous CRM software rollout that cost this company $1.2 million, chronic budget overruns, and most disturbingly, significant irregularities in his expense reports that demand further scrutiny. Rich lunged forward. "You have no right." "Dad, are you going to let him say this?" "I have not only the right, but a legal and ethical obligation," Mr. Croft stated. Furthermore, on Walter Sterling's instructions, I commissioned a third-party forensic audit of the company's finances 6 months ago. He looked toward Brenda, our controller. Brenda was aware of this audit but bound by a non-disclosure agreement until tonight. Brenda gave a small, shaky nod. "The results of that audit," Mr. Croft said, letting the words hang in the air, "are quite illuminating. They show that the divisions under Eleanor's management have consistently overperformed, while those under Richard's have underperformed by an average of 35%. He paused. Most alarmingly, the audit uncovered irrefutable evidence that Richard Vance has been systematically funneling company funds for personal use, falsifying client entertainment expenses, and creating a shell corporation that has billed Vance Industrial for nearly $500,000 in services that were never rendered. Gasps echoed through the room. Rich's face had drained of all color. "That's a lie," he stammered. But his voice was thin and reedy. "The evidence is extensive and has been triple verified by independent forensic accountants," Mr. Croft said calmly. "The full report will be delivered to the board tomorrow morning." He then turned and looked right at me. According to the legal provisions established by Walter Sterling and codified in the company charter, Eleanor Vance has not only earned the right to be considered for leadership, she has demonstrated, by every objective metric, that she is the most qualified candidate for the role. The room exploded into a cacophony of frantic, hushed conversations. Board members were huddled together. Employees were exchanging wide-eyed, shocked glances. My father looked like he was about to have a stroke. This can't be," he sputtered. "I built this company. I decide who runs it." "You built it on the foundation your father and Walter Sterling laid," Mr. Croft corrected him gently, "and you are bound by the rules they put in place." He addressed the room one last time. "The board of directors will convene an emergency meeting to review the audit and make a final determination on succession, as per the charter. Until that time, any announcements about future leadership are to be considered null and void." He gave a respectful nod to the shell-shocked guests. "Thank you for your time. I regret the interruption, but my duty to Vance Industrial required it." He stepped away from the podium, leaving my father and brother standing there, exposed and silent. The party was over. As people processed what they'd just heard, I sat frozen in my chair. Uncle Wally. He had been looking out for me this whole time. Mr. Croft walked over to my table and leaned in. "Your godfather was immensely proud of you, Eleanor. He always said you had the real Vance business sense, just like your grandfather. He made me promise you'd get a fair shot." Tears finally came to my eyes, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered. Mr. Croft simply nodded. "The board meets at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I suggest you come prepared to discuss your vision for this company. You've more than earned your place at that table." As he walked away, I saw my father and brother in a furious, whispered argument, shooting daggers in my direction. The war was just beginning, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a casualty, I was a contender. The elegant party imploded. Board members clustered in tense groups, their whispers urgent and sharp. Employees looked shell-shocked, many of them now sending me small, supportive nods. My mother sat beside me, her face pale, her lifetime of practiced social poise completely shattered by the public airing of our family's dirty laundry. Dad and Rich were huddled with a couple of their staunchest allies on the board, gesturing angrily toward Mr. Croft, who was now calmly reviewing his documents with Brenda. "It's a legal loophole, that's all," I heard my father hiss. "A technicality." The board still answers to me. One of the men, an older gentleman named Mr. Henderson, who had been friends with my grandfather, shook his head. "Arthur, if this audit is real, we have a fiduciary duty to investigate. Embezzlement isn't a technicality." Rich slammed his hand on a table. "This is insane. A few bookkeeping mistakes are being blown out of proportion." Guests started to slip out, offering my father awkward goodbyes while carefully avoiding eye contact with me. The festive mood had curdled into the kind of tension you could cut with a knife. I knew I should probably leave, but a newfound strength, one that had been dormant for decades, kept me in my seat. I had to see this through. My thoughts were cut short when Rich stormed over to my table, his face a mask of fury. "What did you do?" he seethed, leaning over me. "Who did you conspire with to pull this stunt?" I rose slowly, meeting his gaze. "I did my job, Rich. The job I've been doing for years, while you were playing golf and padding your expense account." "This is a setup," he snarled. "You and that snake of a lawyer planned this." Diane from payroll, who had been lingering nearby, suddenly spoke up. "Actually, Richard, Eleanor's stunts in marketing landed us the next-gen contract that saved our fourth quarter. What exactly was your contribution that year?" Rich whirled on her. "You stay out of this. This is family business." "It's company business," corrected Mr. Henderson, who had followed Rich over. "And as a board member, I'm extremely interested in what this audit has to say." My father appeared, his face like a thundercloud. "This whole thing is a gross misrepresentation. Samuel has betrayed my trust. There will be hell to pay." "What exactly is being misrepresented, Dad?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm and steady. "The audit? My contributions? Or the simple fact that Rich isn't the business prodigy you've pretended he is all these years?" The nearby conversations hushed. All eyes were on us. "You've always been pathologically jealous of your brother," he spat, "and now you're using these cheap legal tricks to try and steal something you haven't earned." "Not earned?" My voice cracked slightly, but I held my ground. "I have an MBA from Wharton. I've brought in millions of dollars in new revenue. I dragged this company's brand out of the dark ages while Rich was billing the company for his vacations. What part of my position haven't I earned?" Brenda stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Mr. Vance, the audit is fully documented. The shell company, Sterling Pacific Consulting, billed us for over $400,000 for market research that never existed. We traced the payments to an account controlled by Richard." Rich's face was ashen. "It was a legitimate expense," he croaked. "Research that produced no reports and no data?" Brenda countered, her years of quiet deference replaced by professional resolve. More employees had gathered, forming a circle around us. I noticed, with a jolt, that most of them were standing closer to my side of the confrontation. A subtle but powerful shift had occurred. "Ellie's the one who's actually been running half the business day to day while Rich takes the credit," said Mike from the factory floor, a 25-year veteran. "We all knew it, we just didn't say anything." "This is insubordination," my father roared. "It's not your decision to make anymore, Arthur," Mr. Croft said, rejoining the fray. "The charter is clear. The board evaluates succession on merit. Your personal preference is irrelevant." My father rounded on him. "I've paid you handsomely for 2 decades. Your loyalty should be to me." "My loyalty is to the legal and ethical governance of Vance Industrial. Mr. Croft replied coolly. Walter Sterling was very clear about his wishes, and I am honoring my duty to him and to this company. I took a deep breath and looked my father straight in the eye. Dad, for my entire life, all I have ever wanted was your respect. I have worked harder, achieved more, and cared more than you were ever willing to see. And tonight, you stood in front of everyone we know and told them I was worthless. My voice was low but carried in the silent room. You said I'd be lucky to get a job at Wendy's. You laughed when Rich said I'd mess it up. After everything I've given to this company, that's all you think I am. A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. My father looked genuinely stunned, so used to his authority being absolute that he couldn't comprehend this mutiny. You were always too emotional, he deflected. Business is tough. If you can't take a little ribbing— It wasn't ribbing, I cut him off. It was the same humiliation you've put me through my whole life. The only difference is that tonight there are consequences. I gestured to Mr. Croft and his portfolio. The numbers don't lie, Dad. I've earned my place. Rich has squandered his. Suddenly, Rich lunged toward me. You ungrateful little— That is enough! The command came from my mother. She stepped between us, her expression one I'd never seen before, fierce and resolute. I have stood by and watched this family poison itself for far too long. I will not allow it anymore. She turned to my father. Arthur, you have been blind to Eleanor's talent because you were obsessed with a son carrying on the name, and blind to Richard's failures because you only saw what you wanted to see. She reached out and took my hand. Our daughter deserved better. And this company deserves a leader, not just an heir. The room was stunned into silence. My father stared at my mother as if she were a total stranger. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, breaking the tension. I believe this celebration is concluded. We will convene for an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. All relevant parties should be prepared to discuss the audit and succession as per the company bylaws. He looked directly at me. Eleanor will expect you to present your vision for the company's future. Richard, you should come prepared to answer for the financial irregularities. My father started to protest, but Mr. Henderson held up a hand. Arthur, you built a phenomenal company, but now it's time to ensure its future with proper governance. And just like that, it was over. People started to leave, some offering me quiet words of encouragement. My father and Rich stalked out without another word, their fury radiating off them in waves. My mother squeezed my hand one last time before following them. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I should have said it years ago. As the room emptied, I was left standing with Mr. Croft and Brenda, the two allies I never knew I had. I have a lot of work to do before morning, I said, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. Brenda smiled. The facts are on your side, Eleanor. They always have been. Mr. Croft nodded. Walter always said you were the future of this company. Tomorrow, the board is finally going to see why. As I left the steakhouse, I realized that the invisible chains of family duty and patriarchal tradition that had bound me for so long had finally been broken. The Vance Industrial Headquarters was a classic red brick building, with our stylized V logo mounted over the door. I'd walked through those doors 1,000 times, but never with the sense of purpose I felt that morning. I arrived at 8:15 dressed in a charcoal gray power suit, carrying a portfolio with my presentation. The security guard at the front desk, a man who usually just grunted, greeted me with a respectful, "Good morning, Ms. Vance." News traveled fast. The boardroom was on the top floor with a panoramic view of the city. I was the first one there. I chose a seat near the middle of the long mahogany table, not at the foot where I was usually relegated, but not at the head either. Mr. Croft arrived next, giving me a nod of approval. "I've distributed the audit summary to the board," he said. The full forensic report is available upon request. Brenda followed with a tray of coffee, giving me an encouraging smile. No matter what happens, you've already won, she whispered. The board members trickled in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Mr. Henderson greeted me warmly. Your grandfather would be so proud today, he said, patting my shoulder. Rich arrived 5 minutes before 9, flanked by 2 lawyers I recognized from a top litigation firm. He looked haggard and avoided my gaze. My father was the last to enter, with my mother at his side. He looked regal and defiant. She gave me a subtle, supportive nod. Mr. Henderson called the meeting to order. Given the extraordinary circumstances, he began, we will first review the audit findings, then discuss the succession requirements of the company, charter, and finally, hear from both Richard and Eleanor. My father immediately objected. This entire meeting is out of order. As CEO and majority shareholder, your shareholder status is precisely what's in question, Arthur. Mr. Croft interjected, sliding a folder across the table. According to Section 17 of the Charter, your controlling interest is conditional. It's contingent on your adherence to the merit-based succession procedures established by the founders. If the board finds those procedures were violated, your shares revert to standard voting stock, without any controlling privilege. The room was silent as the board members read the clause, most for the first time. Walter Sterling was a very forward-thinking man, Mr. Croft explained. He built in protections to ensure the company would be led by the most capable Vance, not just the oldest male. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Let's proceed. Brenda, the audit, if you please. For the next 15 minutes, Brenda gave a clinical, devastating presentation. Slides showed the stark contrast. My departments were exceeding targets and cutting costs, while Rich's were bleeding money. The final slides detailed the Shell Corporation, the falsified invoices, and the money trail leading directly to Rich's personal accounts. Rich's lawyers tried to object, but his own defense was weak. These are administrative oversights, he mumbled, not intentional. It sounded pathetic, even to him. Then it was my turn. I stood and laid out my vision. Not with empty promises, but with concrete, data-backed strategies for modernizing our production, expanding into sustainable markets, and creating a management structure that rewarded performance, not politics. Vance Industrial has survived for 3 generations by adapting, I concluded. I believe I have the vision and the integrity to lead us into the next. The debate that followed was fierce. After 2 hours, Mr. Henderson called for a vote. The board voted 9-2 to formally recognize that the succession process had violated the charter, thereby suspending my father's controlling shares. The final vote was on interim leadership. By a vote of 8-3, the board established a co-leadership structure. I would oversee all operations, product development, and strategy. Rich would remain, but stripped of his authority and placed under strict financial supervision. My father, who had been silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke, his voice heavy with disbelief. This company is my life's work. To have my judgment questioned like this. No one is questioning your legacy, Arthur, Mr. Henderson said gently, but the evidence is clear. Eleanor has earned her place, and there are serious questions about Richard's judgment. A woman running a manufacturing company, my father muttered. My own father would be rolling in his grave. Actually, Mr. Croft said quietly, Harold Vance co-signed the charter that made this possible. And Walter Sterling, who knew Eleanor her whole life, anticipated this very day. The meeting adjourned. My father approached me, his face a storm of anger and confusion. You won, he said stiffly, but you have no idea how hard this is. I met his gaze. I've been running parts of it for years, Dad. The only difference is now I'll get the credit. He had no answer. He turned and left with my mother. James stormed out, his lawyers scurrying behind him. Mr. Henderson shook my hand. Your grandfather used to say that talent can skip a generation, he told me. I think he'd say, in this case, it landed exactly where it belongs. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I moved into a corner office. James was sullen and compliant. I immediately began implementing my strategies. And while there was some resistance from my father's old guard, I met it with data and determination, slowly winning them over. Brenda became my most trusted advisor. The company culture began to shift. Meetings became collaborative. Innovation flourished. The investigation into Rich's finances concluded with him agreeing to repay the stolen funds in exchange for avoiding criminal charges. He kept a job, but his power was gone. My father watched from a distance, his fury slowly mellowing into a grudging respect. 6 months after that disastrous party, we celebrated our most profitable quarter in 5 years. I stood on a platform in the middle of the factory floor looking out at all our employees. "This success belongs to every single person in this room," I said. And the applause that followed was real, not just polite. We had a new profit-sharing program, new innovation teams, and a new culture of transparency. The company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The real breakthrough with my father came during a crisis. A key supplier went bankrupt, threatening to halt production. He happened to be in the office. "What's your plan?" he asked, not to criticize, but to listen. I laid out my options. "The new supplier is your best bet," he said. "Let me make a call." The owner owes me one. We worked side by side for hours, his old school connections and my modern crisis management protocols working in perfect sync. We saved the contract. Later, sitting in my office, he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "You handled that well," he admitted. "Better than I would have." It was a small thing, but it was everything. A bridge had been built. I no longer needed his approval, but I could now accept his contributions. My mother confessed to me over lunch one day, "I always knew you had it in you, Ellie. My greatest regret is that I never had the courage to stand up to his blindness." "You stood up when it counted," I told her, and I meant it. The family dinners slowly resumed. They were still awkward, but they were honest. My brother and I found a strained but workable peace. The most important lesson I learned was the difference between seeking validation and creating value. For years, I had been desperate for his approval. My freedom didn't come from finally getting it. It came from realizing my worth was never dependent on it in the first place. The public humiliation I thought would destroy me had, in fact, become the catalyst for my empowerment. The company continues to grow, and so does our family. Neither is perfect, but both are healthier. I don't need my father to see my value anymore because I create it myself every day. And in the greatest irony of all, it was only when I stopped needing his approval that he finally, truly, began to give it. Have you ever had to fight for your own worth against the people who were supposed to support you most? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming challenges and forging your own path. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their value isn't determined by those who refuse to see it. Thank you for listening.